All right, we're running it back one more time. Got to record the first time. Let's see what this goes. First up is Awaken the Woods. X and a green for sorcery with create X/1/1 green forest dryad land creature tokens. This is one of those cards I think is really interesting and really cool because I think one of the reasons why they don't print too many land, not land tokens, but like I'm gonna say land ramp in standard is because it might be so hard for other colors to catch up. I think this is like a nice middle ground where like it's pretty explosive, but at the cost of like, yeah, as long as you have some way to interact with the board, people are going to be able to interact with this card. And so I don't think it's too OP in the sense of like standard, which is why I would say it's probably not gonna see too much play in standard because you can just destroy the board, wipe the board. I think mid-range strategies and control strategies are probably a lion's share of most decks. I don't know, it's just me pulling from out my butt, but I would assume that's probably gonna be the case. And that it's just like, I don't know, people seem to like playing control from what I've played against anyways. Maybe it's because I'm playing too much control though. I don't think it's pretty good in EDH as well, although I don't think it's good for high power decks because I think this sort of strategy, if you're gonna cast like this for like 10 mana or whatever, you might as well just win the game. So I don't think it's good in high power. I think it's good in like the mid or to lower range commander pods where like people want to play the big chunky Timmy spells just to win instead of like a combo. This could be there. A lot of people aren't going to wipe the board just because people I feel like are playing a little more targeted removal happy than just being like, yeah, wipe the board and going that route. So I think this is going to be good in lower to mid power pods. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I guess for standard sense, if you don't need any more ramp or you have nothing else to cast, you can just go in for beats against control with this. Pretty neat. Also, I think it blocks it relatively decently against aggro just because you can, you know, block their or chunk with 2 lands for like aggressive creature and be fine with that because you've already ramped far ahead. You don't need your creatures for lands anymore. In that sense, I think it's gonna be cool to see. Cool to see in neutral formats for MTG Arena anyways. Yeah, that's what I think with this card. I think it's pretty neat. Interested to seeing how it plays. Mythic Rare too. I think it's gonna be pretty popular. Next up is Arms Race. 3 in red for enchantment with 3 red. Put an artifact card from your hand on the battlefield. Artifact gains haste, sacrifice it beginning next end step. Big fan of this card. I think red could use a lot of this, like, I think, what would you call it? It's like a very red effect. It's like only temporary. Is it like being brash? I think red would be really cool to have this effect because I think it's not just used too often. Like I know green gets a lot of like put a creature on the battlefield, but I don't think other colors have that sort of thing. And that's like a good way to get around, I think, counter spells because no one's gonna really stifle a trigger. And if you stifle a trigger, it's like okay, but like how do you know they're not gonna just like put down a soul ring or something, right? Like would you could stifling a soul ring is pretty neat, but like what if it was like a Fellwar Stone? Like you don't know, no one knows. I think it's really cool for that effect. 4 mana is a decent amount, so we're gonna put an 8 mana investment just to get down some artifact. In that sense, I'm hoping it's game ending, but seeing it uncommon, you know what? This is probably a win. I think it's C play in EDH probably. I want to say like high power decks might want to play this too, just because of that effect. But I think the same effect can be found in most creatures, but people aren't going to play like that sort of effect just because it seems like you don't have too much redundancy for playing a red deck for that effect. I could be wrong though. I could be wrong. I'm interested in seeing this play. I don't think anyone plays the other red, I forgot enchantment what it's called. Sneak attack. I don't think people play sneak attack for its effect in higher level pods. So I'm assuming they're not gonna play this for the same reason, even though it's 4 mana. It is 8 mana investment for the first trigger, but yeah, I don't think you'll see too much play. I think maybe mid power and lower. And I don't think you'll see too much play in standard stuff. But cool card, definitely like this. Next card is Bladewing Transmogram. This is one of my favorites. I'm a huge fan of this card. I'm hoping to see it everywhere because it's gonna bite a lot of people in the butt. So this card is a 2 mana artifact creature zombie with Bladewing Transmogram can't block. 4 black and black, return Bladewing Transmogram from the graveyard to the battlefield with a +1 counter on it. This ability costs 4 less to activate if an opponent controls 4 more basic lands. 4/1. So this is a sort of creature that banks off people not playing, or I guess being super cheap to cast late in the game if people aren't relying on basics. I think people should be more rewarded for leaning into one color, and this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is really cool. I think if you're playing against decks and you want to be really greedy, they should have more ways of punishing it because there's a lot of ways to already punish single color decks just because the virtue of being single color, you don't have too many choices. You have to play a little more, I guess, think a little more creatively in that sense. So like having this there, and hopefully they add more, is huge. Big fan of this. I'm gonna be casting this a lot, definitely in EDH, or not EDH, but in Commander. I'm sorry, one of the same. In Standard, I think this will see a lot of play in Standard, especially with like a lot of the new stuff coming out. A lot of things just aren't being cast with Waste, which I think are the only basic colorless source. And so because of that, this thing is going to be able to be triggered for like just a black and a black. This is going to be free. This is going to be continuously recurred. It's going to be great. I will enjoy beating my opponents with this because getting rid of this, unless you're playing white or have some exile shenanigans, is going to be rough. It goes straight from the graveyard to the battlefield, no restrictions, any turn. All it requires is your opponents having 4 more basics. I feel like it's gonna be super common. So I mean, black is just getting blacker. It's getting better each set, better and better. So yeah, I think this probably won't see too much play. Actually, it's if an opponent, maybe we'll see some play as like an aggressive card in a black deck in EDH potentially. But by that itself, probably not too strong. Swinging at someone for 2 mana probably isn't too strong. But I guess you can use it as some sort of like sack fodder in the end, just for 2 mana. Keep doing it. I don't know if that's worth it, but I could see it in like a more aggro pod. I think it'll see some play. I think it'll see a lot of play in standard, just because the upcoming set seems like it's gonna be really pushing people to play a lot of like, and maybe people are gonna rely more than I guess color sources on Power Stones. If that's the case, maybe people are going to play a lot of like just low color decks, and perhaps it's going to be harder to trigger than I think. But I think because there's so many color spells to be played, that people are just going to end up wanting to play multiple colors, and this is going to be, you know, hate towards them. So yeah, cool card. Next card is Persistent Behemoth. 5 mana for artifact creature beast with you may play land cards from your graveyard. Unearth green 2/7. I don't think this card is too strong. Maybe we'll see play in EDH, but I don't think it'll see play in standard. That's just because 2/7's a little weak, and I don't know what kind of strategy requires you to recur lands from your graveyard in standard. But for EDH sake, I think this is pretty nice. I think it'll be like a budget option for people who want to play this sort of effect, like Strip Mine, Azusa sort of combos, or just you're milling a lot and you want to bring back your lands. I think it's neat for that sake. Super easy to cast. I think that'll be super helpful too in a lot of decks, especially if you're playing multiple colors. And I guess in the sense that like this deck is really good for multiple color decks because the fact that a lot of these artifacts are just colorless. So like it doesn't matter what color you pay to cast it. So yeah, it's cool to have a lot of graveyard hate for that. Or sorry, it's cool to have non-basic land hate because of that reason. Yeah, so I'll say low power EDH. Next up is Draconic Destiny, a colorless red for enchantment aura with enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has flying and haste. Also has 1 colorless. This creature gets +1/+0 until end of turns. Dragonish other types. When an enchanted creature dies, return Draconic Destiny to its owner's hand. Probably not. I want to say it's probably not standard. Good for standard. But there has been that one black enchantment I remember in a few standards ago where it was just like 3 mana for giving our creature +3/+1. And you could pay life to cast it from your graveyard. This is sort of like that, but it's in red. So maybe this will see some play. I saw that did get some play, and I think it's just because this has that recurrence that people really like for aggro decks. Like this could help boost aggro decks. The fact that it has haste means it gets past blockers. So maybe we'll see some play in standard. I would say, yeah, maybe this might see some play in standard, some sort of red aggro deck. In EDH, maybe you'll see play in like a dragon deck. Just give dragon type to something that you need to have dragon type. But I feel like if you already have a dragon based deck, you probably won't need that. But I'm curious to see how that goes. So I'll say lower power EDH decks, and maybe you'll see some play in standard. Next up is Autonomous Assembler, 5 generic for artifact creature assembly worker that has prototype, white, and a generic 2/2. Vigilance, 1 and a tap, put a +1 counter on target assembly worker you control, 4/5. I don't know why this is good. I don't know if this is good, but I could see this becoming a staple in a lot of like aggressive creature-based decks, because giving +1/+1 to a creature to make it bigger and not having to attack with every creature sort of helps you play against things like Settle the Wreckage, or helps you play against things like, especially having Vigilance, the Wandering Emperor. So this is like cool in that sense. It can make itself bigger, so that's kind of cool. But other than that, I would say it could see play in standard, but probably not too much play in EDH. Maybe it will. Maybe the one generic is like good enough where like counter decks will want to play it. So I'll put it in like mid power and lower for EDH, and it will see some play in standard just because it sees like a decent aggressively costed or statted. And I guess even just like a lined card giving +1 counter means you probably want to attack with it. For like it seems pretty decent for aggressive decks. And yeah, next one is Rootwire Amalgam, 5 generic from artifact creature golem with 1 and a green to get a 2/3. It also has 3 green sacrifice Rootwire Amalgam. Create an X colors artifact creature token where X is the number is 3 times Rootwire Amalgam's power. It gains haste on turn. Actually only a sorcery. 5/5. So this is cool because at first if you activate it, after swinging a couple times for 5, getting 3 times the power means it becomes a 6/6. Say like you need to get in, then amalgam becomes a 6/6 and you just start swinging the 6/6. But if you get it from a 5/5, this can be like a 15/15 because you get 3 times your amalgam's power, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, this would be cool. I'm surprised, actually not really surprised, but like the fact it doesn't have trample, I'm glad because it seems like a really cool card. It gets big fast. I guess you can bring it back too. It's not like exiling itself, it's just sacrificing itself. I think this is a cool card. I think this will see some play in standard as like an aggressively costed, or yeah, aggressive sort of aligned card. Probably won't see any play in EDH. This next card here is Bushwhack, I believe it's called. I don't know. It might be a tread. I have no clue. It's a 1 mana sorcery with choose one. Search library for your basic land, put it into your hand and shuffle, or target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. I think this is pretty good, especially for being an uncommon. It does things that green wants to do. Also offers an offensive, but also just a proactive strategy. So I'm curious what kind of decks will want to play this. Probably just like a deck that wants to ramp and has some sort of mana dorks that can go in for attacks at times, or just sort of like a purely mid-range strategy. Is having a removal part, but also a way to ramp into your like main strat or win con. Seems pretty neat. I think this will see some play in standard. Probably honestly we'll see some play in EDH too, just because it's a 1 mana sorcery that can interact with the board. That's pretty cool. Next card is Misery's Shadow. 1 in a black for Creature Shade. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile instead. 1 generic Misery's Shadow gets +1/+1 until end of turn. 2/2. I see a lot of colors are getting like these fire breathing things, which I'm a big fan of. I think it helps a lot against control-y decks where like you don't have to invest any more into the board because you can just pump the creature that's on the board. So that way it sort of acts like a weird pseudo card advantage, especially if you're playing more of an aggressive strategy. I'm a big fan of it. I think the fact that this exiles things as well is interesting because you're playing black and have a lot of ways to hit creatures just to exile them, make them die. Yeah, I think this is neat. I don't know what kind of strategy wants this. It seems like it's a little too bland, but I could be wrong. Maybe just the pump is strong enough for it to be an aggressive strategy. I think it'll see some play, and maybe as like just a graveyard hate and aggressive aggro decks in EDH. But I can see this being played somewhere, maybe like a sideboard if you're playing like it's like a Phoenix deck or like a red deck. Not a red deck, but like, yeah, maybe as like a sideboard card against certain strategies. I could see that. Yeah, so it'll see maybe, I don't think any plans standard, but I think like Eternal formats will want to sideboard this card. An MTG Arena probably more specifically. And probably not no play in EDH, or maybe low power. Maybe low power. It's like a graveyard hate card. Next up is Cityscape Leveler. 8 mana for artifact creature construct with trample. When you cast a spell, and whenever your Cityscape Leveler attacks, destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent, its controller creates a tapped Power Stone token. Unearth 8/8/8. I'm a big fan of repeatable removal. This is that. I'm probably gonna put in a few of my decks, if not all of them, especially for like, not all of them, but like in my artifact-based strategies or my strategies with low colors that need some sort of hate against certain kinds of styles. Because this is 8 mana, destroy something, so it's really similar to Meteor Golem, but also when it attacks, it gets in, right? Also, if it gets killed, even on the stack, you can unearth it later. So it's offering a lot of power here. I'm a big fan of this. That's gonna be super fun. I think it'll see some play in at least mid power and lower in EDH because it's really just a generic kill anything answer. Probably won't see any play in maybe if big artifact decks are popular, it'll see play in standard. Other than that, I think it's fine. It can hit everything. So Blade Quail Serpent, X and a 6 for artifact creature Serpent. When it enters battlefield, for each blue that was spent to cast it, draw a card. When it enters battlefield, for each black spent to cast it, each opponent discards a card. For each red spent to cast it, it gains trample until end of turn and haste +1. This is interesting. So this is a Grixis Snake. It feels a lot like there was like another X-spelled Serpent I feel like we got. It's not quite that, but it seems close. Especially like you're probably playing it in like Grixis sort of strategy. Like this could be 6 mana for a 5/4 that draws you 3 cards, or has your opponent discard 3 cards, or it just swings in for like, I guess 8 damage, which I guess probably isn't that good. But the fact that like you can split this between different colors makes it even better. If you're like, you know, your opponent doesn't have any cards to discard, just like cast it for like a blocker against aggro decks, because you know the aggro's using all the cards. Aggro's using all the cards. And you can just draw a few cards with this card. Yeah, this is a neat card. I think this will see some play in standard, and I think eventually, even I don't know, enters battlefield for each blue spent to cast. I don't think you want to cast this in EDH. It seems kind of slow. I could be wrong. I guess you can use it to draw your deck. It's like an infinite mana outlet. It is kind of slow, but you need to also be in blue for this. I guess red can have infinite mana, but also an infinite mana in red, unless you have a way to filter it. I don't think it wins you the game. So I think it could potentially see some play. Maybe mid power and lower, but I think you'll see some play in standard, definitely, for sure. Next up is Myrell Shield of Argive, 3 and a white legendary creature, human soldier. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. Whenever Myrell Shield of Argive attacks, create X1 soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. 3/4. So this is a lot like an Agila, a little slower. Requires you to attack on turn 5 with 3/4, which seems like it's a little too late personally, but the fact that it has silence means you can interact with the board before attacking with this, which is pretty strong, especially for like an aggro strategy. It means you have free reign on the board as long as you have enough card advantage to sort of move people's creatures out of the way. I think this is sick, and it can get basically, it can become like a win conless stacks card for like a mono white deck. Big fan of this. I think I might make a commander out of this. But then what am I gonna do with Loren? I'm gonna feel bad that she's got left out. There was a leak about this and it was 2 mana, but 4 mana is like, okay, I guess you can have enough like enough equipment to sort of, you know, be fine with that. It creates creatures to attack, and like you also need a way to protect it, because all you have to do, unlike Najeela requires just a creature to attack of a particular type. I don't know the exact wording. This means this requires Myrell to attack, so it definitely needs to be built around a little more than Najeela, but interesting card still. Big fan that white got this sort of card. Might have to build it. I think it'll see some play, and I think it'll definitely see play in EDH. I could be wrong here. I would say high power and lower might be a little too slow, but high power and lower probably is like having a deck built around this, like an aggro strategy. I could totally see it. I would say it could see some play in standard if there's like a soldier strategy, but also it could, it's like a top end. It's not a questing beast. I don't think so. I don't think it'll see play in standard. I think it's just a little too slow in standard, but I could be wrong. Maybe a soldier strategy is strong enough it'll see play. We saw that land that you know required you to build around soldiers. That could push it, but I don't think you'll see play in standard. Just rough thought. Sky Strike Officer, 2 and a blue for creature human soldier with flying. Whenever Sky Strike Officer attacks, create a 1/1 color soldier artifact creature token. Tap 3 untapped soldiers you control, draw a card, 2/3. It seems a little slow for standard. I'm gonna say it's not gonna see play in standard or EDH. It is a payoff though for standard, where you have probably a lot of soldier creature tokens, but for non-standard, I don't think, is there a, I'm thinking like there's a white X EDH soldier deck, but I can't imagine having too much blue in it, right? Like it's probably, yeah, it's probably red and blue, or red and white, or blue and white for soldier deck. I don't know who the commander would be. Probably was already released before this set. I don't know what the soldier commander is. But like, if there is a soldier commander, this could see play because it just draws cards decently for 3. It'd be interesting. Yeah, I don't think it'll see too much play though. Next up is Exaggeration. I don't know if it's Exaggeration or Over the Top. I'm conflicted. I think it's Exaggeration, just in a different language. 5 red for sorcery with each player reveals the top card of the library until they reveal the number of non-land permanents they control. Then put all the permanent revealed this way into the battlefield, the rest in the bottom library random order, and the rest in each player's graveyard. I'm sorry. This is interesting. So each player reveals cards from the top of their library equal to the number of non-land permanents they control. Then put all permanents revealed this way onto the battlefield. So non-permanents are put into the graveyard. This is like really not janky. I guess it is janky. It's very Timmy. And I feel like the deck that wants this wants to play a lot of tokens. There's like no mid game. It's all late or early because you want to dump it out early and then play this. But then like, yeah, you're just gonna get a bunch of like early game cards and late game cards. No mid game, which might be fine. But yeah, he seems very Timmy. I don't think he'll play in EDH or standard for the most part. Next up is Fateful Cooperation. 3 and a black for sorcery with target opponent gains control of target artifact you control. Draw cards equal to its mana value. So this is probably one of those cards that you want to put on a card that has a pretty big downside. I can't think of any in particular, but if those exist, probably see play in EDH as like a weird jank strategy. Don't think it's too good in standard. We saw this sort of effect from red. It was like Harmless Offering. That didn't see any play. I feel like it's going to be the same strategy unless there's a lot of, I guess, cards that have big downsides, which I don't think I've seen too many of. So I'm going to say not see any play in standard, and probably will see some niche play in low power EDH.